The relationship between Israel and Iran is one of the Middle East's most contentious and multifaceted dynamics. On the surface, they present themselves as bitter adversaries locked in a geopolitical and ideological struggle. Iran frequently denounces Israel as an illegitimate state. It supports various groups seen as hostile to Israel, while Israel presents Iran as a primary threat to its security and regional stability. However, beneath this apparent enmity lies a complex web of strategic, political, and regional factors that have led some analysts to suggest that Israel and Iran might, in certain respects, act more like covert allies than outright foes. Before delving into the details of the relationship between Israel and Iran, it is important to start with the Iranian Revolution, also known as the 1979 Revolution. Before the so-called revolution, Iran had a complex but stable relationship with Israel under the rule of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Initially, under his rule, Iran and Israel maintained a relatively stable and cooperative relationship, particularly during the 1950s and 1960s. This relationship was based on mutual strategic interests, such as countering Arab nationalism and fostering economic and military cooperation. Shah's regime viewed Israel as a strategic ally in a region dominated by Arab states that were often hostile to both countries. Iran provided Israel with oil, and the two countries engaged in intelligence sharing and economic cooperation. The Shah saw Israel as a counterbalance to Arab nationalism and as a partner in modernizing Iran's military and economy. Israel, in turn, valued Iran as a non-Arab ally in the Middle East that could help counterbalance the influence of hostile Arab neighbors. This alliance was part of Israel's periphery doctrine, which aimed to build alliances with non-Arab states in the region, including Turkey and Ethiopia, to encircle and counteract its Arab adversaries. However, by the mid-1970s, the Shah's views began to shift. He became increasingly critical of Israeli policies which aimed at undermining his rule in Iran and the influence of the Zionist lobby in the United States. The interview with Mike Wallace in 1976 is a key example where he openly criticized the Israeli lobby, suggesting that their influence in the US could ultimately be detrimental to Israel's own interests. His statement highlighted his concern that the actions of the Zionist lobby were causing resentment and backlash, which could undermine Israel's long-term security and stability. The Shah's criticism of Israel and the Zionist lobby marked a departure from the more cordial relations that had characterized much of his reign. This shift happened at a time when Israel had to adjust its Middle East strategy due to changing geopolitical conditions. By the mid-1970s, the Shah's regime had lost its significance and value for Israel. A more radical regime that calls for the destruction of Israel and supports armed groups seen as hostile to Israel would have been a much better option, especially for the idea of a greater Israel. Moreover, by installing a radical Islamic regime in Iran, Israel was able to upset the power balance in the Middle East. The establishment of the so-called Islamic Republic not only significantly altered Iran's foreign policy, but also brought a new ideological force that would challenge both the Arab states and non-Arab states like Turkey. This change could cause divisions within the Muslim world, reducing the chances of a united Arab or Muslim opposition to Israel. With Iran adopting a revolutionary anti-Western and anti-Israeli stance, Arab states would face a new ideological and geopolitical rival. This rivalry could divert attention and resources away from the Arab-Israeli conflict. Indeed, after the revolution, Iran's radicalization and the Iran-Iraq War, 1980-1988, deeply divided the Middle East, creating new alliances and rivalries that changed the regional dynamics. The Gulf Arab states, for example, Saudi Arabia in particular, began to view Iran as a more immediate threat than Israel, leading to shifting alliances in the region. According to Israeli calculations, the so-called Islamic Republic in Iran, while hostile on the surface, could eventually serve as a convenient adversary that Israel could use to justify its military buildup and secure Western support. The ongoing state of tension between Israel and Iran provides a continuous rationale for Israel's strategic alliances and defense policies, allowing it to maintain its military superiority and ensure its security interests. Israel has always needed enemies to pursue its Greater Israel agenda. It uses these enemies to get financial and military support from the US while presenting itself as a victim. The so-called Islamic Revolution drastically altered Iran's foreign policy and its stance toward Israel. The new regime in Iran started calling for Israel's destruction. Along with Israel, Iran played a significant role in creating armed groups such as Hezbollah and Hamas in the region. Iran has been providing these groups with financial and military support. This assistance was provided with the tacit approval of Israel. Iran and Israel, for example, brought to the formation of Hamas to undermine the authority of Yasser Arafat. Israel saw Hamas as a counterbalance to the secular nationalist influence of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, led by Yasser Arafat. This was based on the idea that dividing the Palestinian political spectrum could weaken the broader Palestinian struggle against Israel. Despite the public perception of animosity between the Iranian regime and Israel, they have covertly cooperated since the Iranian Revolution. The first notable instance was the support of Israel for Iran during the war between Iran and Iraq. This covert cooperation, often hidden from the public eye, reveals a layer of complexity in their relationship. The geopolitical chessboard of the Middle East is not solely defined by open hostility, it is also shaped by discrete alliances and pragmatic decisions. Understanding these hidden dynamics provides a more nuanced view of the regional power play and underscores the intricate nature of international relations in the Middle East. While overt actions and public statements may tell one story, the reality often lies in the shadows of covert operations and strategic alignments. Despite the Islamic Republic of Iran's vehement anti-Israeli rhetoric and its support for anti-Israel movements, Israel saw the Iran-Iraq war as an opportunity to pursue its own strategic interests in the region. Throughout the 1980s, as Iran and Iraq were locked in a brutal conflict, Israel quietly provided military, financial, and intelligence assistance to Iran. In the early 1980s, Israel viewed Iraq under Saddam Hussein as the more immediate and significant threat to its security. Iraq had one of the most powerful military forces in the Arab world and was known for its hostility toward Israel. Saddam's regime had previously participated in wars against Israel. By supporting Iran, Israel aimed to counterbalance Iraq's power in the region. Israeli policymakers believed that a strong Iraq would pose a greater danger to Israel. Moreover, at that time, Iraq was part of the Arab coalition that was hostile to Israel. By aiding Iran, Israel hoped to further fragment the Arab world and exploit the sectarian and geopolitical divides between Sunni Arab states and the Shia majority Iran. This division would make it more difficult for the Arab states to unite against Israel, thereby enhancing Israel's strategic position in the Middle East. Israel's support for Iran during the Iran-Iraq war was covert and largely involved arms transfers and intelligence sharing. Israel provided Iran with weapons and military equipment, including spare parts for the Iranian military's arsenal, which included US-made aircraft and weapons systems acquired during the Shah's era. After the 1979 revolution, Iran was cut off from Western arms supplies, leaving it in desperate need of military hardware to sustain its war effort against Iraq. Some reports suggest that Israeli arms sales to Iran were facilitated through intermediaries and clandestine channels. These sales included small arms, ammunition, and other military supplies. Israel's involvement in these transactions was kept secret due to the sensitive nature of the relationship and the so-called hostility between the two nations. One of the known operations where Israel assisted Iran was Operation Seashell in 1981. In this operation, Israel reportedly sent arms and ammunition to Iran to help bolster its defenses against Iraq. At the end of the war and the subsequent Gulf Wars, which Israel pushed the US to initiate based on false information and intelligence, Iraq became weakened and divided. However, Iran's influence grew. The Iran-Iraq War and subsequent Gulf Wars thus serve as a poignant example of how Israel and Iran's relationship is not merely defined by public perception of animosity. The story will continue. Therefore, stay tuned and stay curious. If you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into the fascinating world of Middle Eastern geopolitics, political analysis, and more, then hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we release new content that breaks down complex topics, providing insightful analysis and thought-provoking discussions. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Join our community today and let's explore these intriguing subjects together. Thank you for watching and for your subscription.